So, Bassel,
Yes,
what you been reading?
not much.
Huh. Welcome to What You're Reading. It's a show that I made up so I could have an excuse to talk about most of the books that I talk about because I mostly just read garbage that nobody has heard about.
Well, to be fair, I read books that are garbage, but people have heard about them. So we're sort of on the same page.
We're both hipsters, but in like...
Yeah, different
You
scale.
you dress like a hipster.
Of course.
I act like one.
Well, hipster clothing taste is good, so I will.
And you gotta excuse me, but I can't remember everything I've read, so I'm going to go look at my list of things that I've read. But we can start with you.
Yeah.
How you actually remember what you've read? That's a few books you've read.
Well, to be fair, as I said, I haven't read that many books.
Which is kind of unusual for me to hear from you.
Yeah, the main reason I haven't read that many books this year is, as you know, COVID. Because the reason why it's COVID for me is I like to read at cafes and while sitting on the bus or the train. And I haven't
Which
done
has
that.
been difficult, I guess.
Yeah, I haven't done that much this year. And also, I'm usually when I like to talk about a book, I have the book in hand. And for the most books, I don't. But you actually have some of my books in your bookcase, so if it's okay, I'll like to pull it out. Is that fine?
That's fine, I'll put it back.
I'll put it by. That's fine.
I've read 75 books this year, so maybe I should start. Nerd!
Yeah,
Thanks.
nerd.
First thing I read this year was actually Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. Okay, so it's very fantasy, but it's also very D&D and very rock and roll.
Okay, sounds weird, but
Yeah, no, it's kind of like breakneck speed, explains just enough of the plot and background of the world so you can kind of latch onto it without feeling overwhelmed with lore and stuff. And it has like a bunch of badass warriors, and you know, I thoroughly enjoy following these people. This is a book that came out last year or this year or something, so
fairly new.
yeah, unlike most of the stuff I read.
You mostly read books from like the 80s or 70s, right?
I
Weird fantasy.
got like a whole box full of fantasy and sci-fi books one year where my mom was like, you know, my friend is getting rid of these 5 boxes, you can probably pluck through them. She stopped me after I emptied 3.
Sounds like something I would do. That would be like heaven for me.
Now, Kings of the Wild, I will say that there are some weaknesses to it, others because, you know, it's fun, it's breakneck speed, it's very interesting, but it's thematically really weak. Like, oh, the world is changing and we're old now. And also, like, there are so many characters. You remember the band pretty well, but, like, you get introduced to a bunch of characters and you never fucking remember them. Anyways, what more have you read?
Yeah, this is going to be really short because I know this book really well. It's one of my favorite books of all time, even though you might say that the plot is kind of weak. It is Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. Most of you will either know the book or know the movie. I refuse to believe that none of you people watching have not heard about the book or the movie.
If you comment that, you know, you haven't, we won't believe you. No, I'm familiar with the movie. I own the book, but I have over 700 books.
Yeah.
So, you know, I use a little bit of time to get into reading stuff.
Yeah.
But no, I love the movie, and I'm very interested in checking out the book. And we've had many a conversation, or you have had many a one-sided conversation with me about Anne Rice's relationship to that movie. But But this is book talk, so talk about the book.
Yeah. Well, actually, I could actually try to compare the book versus the movie very shortly, because the story is mainly the same as like the book and the movie. The story is mainly the same, so it's easy. But the book is about a young man named Louis who is fed up with life. He is basically like suicidal. You could call him a millennial from the 1700s, sort of. Fed up with life, hates everything.
So he's moving into the 1800s and it's just like...
I hate it. No, he is an adult. From the like in those times, he would be seen as an adult, but he doesn't feel like it. It's too.
You're clarifying a whole lot. I'm glad.
No. It's like he doesn't feel like it, but in those times he would be seen as an adult, and he's like, I don't know, midlife because of the life expectancy.
5.
Yeah. No. But he basically tries to kill himself in many ways. He doesn't want to kill himself. He wants people to kill him, so he doesn't have to do the burden himself.
In many ways.
Yeah. No, like messing with people so they beat him to death, or cheating at a poker game so they shoot him and stuff like that.
And he just doesn't.
No. And one time when he walks out of a poker game, actually, as I said, he gets attacked by a vampire. And the vampire is like, oh, I'm going to give you immortal life. You want to live or die. And he doesn't want to die. Actually, weird. Eventually, he kind of likes being a vampire, but at the same time hates it.
You could say, it sucks.
Yeah. He's ambivalent. Yeah. God damn it. It sucks.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
I fucking gotcha.
Yeah, no, he is ambivalent to being a vampire because he likes seeing the world in a new light, but he is still as miserable as he was before, but now he's undead. And so, like, his depression and hatred for the man who turned him into a vampire is sort of the main theme. But the most interesting part of this book is not the story itself, it's the feeling you have when you read it, because the book is so extremely depressing. So if you struggle with depression yourself, you would like feel that someone understands you.
Yeah, feel a kinship to the book.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I have a similar book to talk about, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. I'm almost done with the book. I'm not going to go too much into the story because it's fairly short and sweet.
Yeah, as we can see, it's barely...
Yeah, this is the thick edition, sort of.
Yeah, for us who are thick.
Yeah, thick.
Like
No.
here.
Yeah. In the story, they also meet a little girl who is clinging to her mother, who is sitting in a chair rotting away. I'm not talking about being mentally gone like dementia. I mean literally rotting away because she's dead. The girl doesn't know that her mother is dead and she's just sad.
Talk about dying with your kids, y'all.
Yeah, so they... anyways,
It could happen to you.
It could happen to you, beware. No, so Louis, the depressed one, he turns that girl into a vampire so that she wouldn't be alone. And also, by the way, I forgot to mention the other vampire's name. It's Lestat. He is the evil one in the book. Anyways, they all live together, so they basically adopted her. And yeah, and what happens after that is they fight after living together for almost 100 years and so forth. That's what I'm going to say with the story so far. As I stated, the most interesting thing about this book is not the story itself. Well, kinda, because if you remove the fact that they are vampires, it's basically about two men who live together in a big fancy mansion. They are rich, they have a beautiful life, and then they adopt a child. Now, keep in mind, this was back in 1976. So when this book came out, it was a trailblazer for the LGBT, but also hated, and I mean hated, mostly by Americans because Anne Rice is American. But it was
Because she's an American? Wouldn't
Yeah.
that make them like her because she one of ours?
No.
I get it. I
Yeah.
get it.
Americans are not that welcoming to most people, at least not back then. Yeah, so it's actually mostly an LGBT story, and I thought that was a joke the first time I read the book. I thought, oh, I must be wrong. But she actually, she said like, oh yeah, that's true. And she said, that's totally true, and that was my point. But also the most sad thing about the book is the girl character, the little girl, is based on Anne Rice's own daughter, who died by leukemia at the age of, I think it was 5 or 6. That's also one of my favorite points about the book, like trying to keep her daughter alive through her books.
Yeah, it's sad, and killing her, metaphorically at least, murdering herself so that she could live.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I'm very much looking forward to getting into Interview with a Vampire. I just have a lot of trash to read first.
Yeah, read
So
that.
much fucking trash.
Read that trash.
But it's definitely on my radar.
Yeah. I actually fell down a flight of stairs just because my foot was asleep. Just like.
Yeah, well, you and anything is like, what is the worst outcome, and you will somehow find a worse one with your body.
I will survive.
Yeah, you'll survive us all, but you'll do so with like every condition known to man. The fact that you haven't caught COVID is frankly amazing.
You know, that was actually a period I thought I had COVID. But it turns out it was just a severe version of the flu. And I mean severe.
Yeah, of course you did.
And
You probably got both at the same time and you just lived through it.
the perfect tornado.
Yeah. You're just a fucking mess, I love it. But another book I read was The Priory of the Orange Tree.
I love the title.
I didn't like it.
It's surprising.
Like, I think I wrote here. I'm just gonna write up what I wrote. I said it was okay. This is why I needed notes. The Priory of the... by Samantha Shannon. The Priory of the Orange Tree is a victim of its own hype, with all these authors coming out acting as if it reinvented the wheel of fantasy fiction, when what it actually did was make a cool setting that works better in theory than in praxis. Perhaps my biggest gripe is that one of the societies are based on misogyny, but the women are equally as free as men. Well, I think it's neat that women get to do what they want without judgment. The history of this fiction doesn't support it, which makes it really tiresome. It forces itself into something else too much to have its themes make sense while the world doesn't. And while I like the themes, it just took me out of the story too much to enjoy it.
Good review. Even though I haven't read the book myself. But,
Oh yeah, fucking... That's everything I have to say about that, actually, by the way. So I'll just move on to something I actually did read, which I have conveniently here. Bleh, I read comics. The Wicked and the Divine. Nerd!
comics aren't books. Well, in this case, they are books, but technically,
Don't gatekeep people.
you're wrong.
Ding dong, your opinion on what is and isn't literature is wrong. But yeah, I did get these, The Wicked and the Divine. Looks very pretty.
I was just
And
about to
it's
say.
very well illustrated. It's basically about gods coming back every few years and then dying to just affect life on Earth.
No.
And just be like superstars. It's very interesting and cool in that aspect, but that's kind of it. It's kind of like it's cool, but it uses too much time to explain its own how the world basically works. So I sit there going, okay, yeah. Can I please try and get into these characters? I want to get into these characters, and you sit there reading, and at the end you're like, yeah, that was cool, I guess, but nothing special. That's what I got out of the Wicked and the Divine.
Yeah.
And I also read the Hellboy series done, and I have a review of it, so you can watch that instead. But suffice it to say, I think it's overrated, but still cool. Kind of like this. Heard a lot of good things about the Wicked and the Divine. That's quite my thing.
Well, I have to say that comic books, I read manga, so it's kind of comic books, but...
It's comic books, but made in Japan.
Yeah, and better. No, like I said, I like to read comic books,
What can I throw at you that will impact you the most? Oh, the complete Far Side. Sounds heavy.
No, but I will say that when it comes to comic books especially, like the Western comic books, people are so divided about what they think is good, bad, or just plain shit.
Don't worry, we can all agree Vote Loki is garbage, and I can't believe it's getting a TV series from Disney Plus.
What? Oh god. No.
Or a miniseries, or it's getting adapted. Listen, I don't care. Vote Loki is absolute garbage. It's filth, and I hate it. With a passion.
I would have to agree.
It's just... I can totally see how it can work for TV. But it totally doesn't work as a comic book because, like, the artists and the writers were just fucking lazy. So, not to bang too much on them, but it's like so poorly drawn and skips like vital panels to explain what is happening. Background characters are just fucking ugly. I don't like it. So we can all agree on that, right?
Yeah.
I hope the TV show is good because maybe it can expand on those things and maybe like rewrite it to not be garbage. Anyways, you were saying?
Yeah, saying, yeah, I think I was saying I was agreeing with you.
As you should.
Yeah.
What more have you read?
Well, let's see. I didn't know that comic books were on the table. For
They're not.
Why did you mention
Now
it?
they are. I know. I have more comics to put on the tape.
I will have to know that he's not actually that funny. It's just that I'm really tired because I have chronic insomnia. So if someone said to me, "Hey Basil, yeah," and I was like, "Yeah, what?" And they said like, "Brown cheese," I would just laugh my ass off. So
Eggs.
yeah. Yeah. No. As I said, I didn't know that comic books were all on the table, and now they are. So I'm going to talk about that a bit later because I don't want to talk about a comic book right after you, sort of.
Okay, that's fair.
Well, the next book I read this year is also one book I've read several times, actually. But I always wait a couple of years between each read because the feeling that you get when you read the book is so special. So I don't want to ruin that feeling completely the next time I read the book. I can't remember the name of the author. I'm also saying that because I don't want to pronounce the Japanese name wrong. It's a book called simply Goth. It's
Not to be confused with the movie Goth, which is trash.
Yeah, that's actually true.
You've seen it?
When you talk about the movie, I actually bought the book before I saw the movie because the place I got the book had the movie. And I really wanted to buy the movie. But the next time I came to the store, the movie was gone. And I saw, oh, they have the book. Great, I'll read it. And I started to read the book and I was like, hold on, this has nothing to do with the movie. What is this? But it turns out, after I watched the movie, the book is so much better because it's not that story.
I am really unsure if we're talking about the same movie.
You're talking about the Japanese goth movie, right?
No, I'm talking about the American goth movie where a goth girl takes a goth couple and forces them to do murder and stuff. You haven't seen that absolute classic? Don't worry, nobody has.
No, okay, that's fine, but
I thought we were on like a wavelength, which was so bizarre because nobody had fucking seen Goth. Nobody has seen it.
Oh, I'm gonna see it now. No,
Don't. I am actively discouraging you from seeing the movie, the American movie Goth, because it's just trash, it is bad, it is like uncomfortable in a way even I don't like.
Yeah. But anyways, I thought you were talking...
Even I don't like
Yeah, you like a bunch of bad stuff. But anyways, I thought
Jaws 3 is a classic. How dare you?
You're wrong. No, I thought you were talking about the actual Japanese movie called Goth. But, like... Anyways... mowing away the confusion about the book and the movie, whatever. The book called Goth is a collection of short stories that was intended as short stories, actually, because they were a small project from a like really young author, but later the publishers said like, oh, you know, the themes in those stories are not that different, so what if we combine them? So that's how it became one book with a few minor changes. But each story has something to do with a deranged killer and young kids interested in the macabre and grotesque. But in one of the stories you follow two teenagers who find out that there's a serial killer in their area. But instead of trying to catch the killer and deliver him to the police, they just want to figure out why he's doing it, how, and, well, who he is. So they can learn from him because they're both really bad humans themselves. They want to hurt other people. They actually stalk him with several clues. They use the clues to stalk him and just watch him with binoculars far, far away and see what happens. Eventually they catch the person. But they're like, oh, we know who you are, but we're not gonna report you, so just skedaddle, go away. The next story is one that I always skip because I don't like violence against animals.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know how many content warnings I have to add because of the books you're reading?
And the reason why they're doing it is because they've been mishandled by their parents. I always skip that part because I was like, oh, I read it once, remember the story, don't want to read it again. And the third story is kind of like the first one, so I don't want to talk that much about it actually.
No.
But fun fact, the reason why the book is called Goth confused me until I found out what it actually meant. Goth is actually an old word.
The old world.
The old world. Well, sort of, because it comes from Old Latin or something in that area, describing something that is grotesque, brutal, or like.
It also was a people.
Yeah, but
so that's definitely a little bit interesting for me. Oh, they were such assholes. They were like, what should these people call themselves? We are the Goths.
Yeah.
We're gonna use your name as an insult. Fuck you.
Yeah, but the most interesting fact about this, the first people that has been recorded to be called Goth were the Vikings. The moment they invaded, oh, I can't remember what it's called, some old monastery in England.
Yeah, I know of what you speak.
Yeah. Most of you who watch us will probably know what I'm talking about.
Nah. They watch this.
Yeah.
They dumb fucks.
You're a dumb fuck boy.
Subscribe to the Patreon.
Because you clearly love your fans. Calling them dumb. Yeah. Anyways, that was that book.
I think it's a little bit inaccurate because I specifically remember that the Romans had clashes with people that were called Goths as well, which is before the Viking era, but you know.
Yeah, that was just something I read. It might be wrong.
Yeah.
I didn't say that I was right.
Why you mean that not everything that is written down is factual? How will I live myself not knowing about knowing the postal service of the disc world is actually not real? I also read The Seven Towers by Patricia C. Brada.
Okay.
It wasn't good.
Surprising. Very surprising.
It failed in basically every aspect. Okay, you want to write a political fantasy. Make the politics interesting is a very good advice I can give you, just off the top of my head.
Yeah.
It would have been nice if she had done that.
Well, for most people...
It would have been nice if she hadn't used, like, advanced fantasy words all over the place that I didn't really have time to get attached to. It would have been nice if she didn't keep you in the dark about things you don't need to be kept in the dark about, like, at all. And, you know, it would have been nice if I didn't, like, almost black out and forget every sentence right after I read it. Like, it was almost like just tearing out a page after you've read it and just throwing it behind you. Like, I read a sentence like 5 or 6 times, and I still couldn't follow what was happening in the story.
Yeah.
So eventually I also I count that as being as reading a book. You don't need to finish a book, you just need to kind of come to the point where you figure, I'm getting nothing out of this.
That's the problem I have with most fantasy. I love fantasy, but...
Yes, I am fantasy trash.
Yeah.
So I recognize, I know.
Yeah.
That I love me some fantasy, but even I can admit some of it is absolute garbo.
Well, my opinion is like fantasy is great, but you have to sift through so much garbage to find.
Like the Lord of the Rings.
Well, I like the book, not the movies. Sorry.
I like the movies, not the book.
Well, speaking of finding good fantasy, the reason why I'm talking about garbage is because most people start out copying Lord of the Rings. So it's like reading.
So it automatically gets bad, I get it.
No, like I was saying, the first book in a series that mostly have 12 books or something because it's fantasy.
It's a Wheel of Time, you mean?
Yeah, but like a good example, they always have the flavorings of Lord of the Rings. So it feels like anytime I start to read a new fantasy series, it feels like I'm reading Lord of the Rings for the 50th time. So.
Here. These don't remind me of Lord of the Rings, so you know, they're good.
Oh.
The Orphan's Tales.
I remember you talked about this.
Yes, because they're good. I also read a comic, another one, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. It's the first collection. It's a classic written by Alan Moore.
Yeah.
And I know his politics, so I know it's supposed to be like a takedown of British nationalism, but it just reads as very British nationalist.
Oh.
And also, like, there's an explicit, like, horrifying rape scene, and that made me immediately just go, no, I don't want to read it anymore. So I just gave up because it wasn't for me.
That's kind of interesting because I've never read much of the comic. I have read some, but I've always heard that the comic is supposed to be great, as you said. And that the movie is utter garbage.
No, the movie's utter garbage, but it's kind of like fun garbage. It's a dumb movie, but it's fun.
Yeah.
Also, funny enough, it made Sean Connery quit acting, but the comic is like, so like that's not a good thing necessarily. It's just like, you know, it's a little bit funny to me. He hated working on that movie so much and just thought that, oh, CGI. I said no to being Gandalf because I thought because the movie was full of CGI, but CGI, that must mean the movie's good. Like, can you believe it? He was like 140 by the time he he started in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Like, he should have understood by that point that no matter the technology, it's the script that makes it good. Perhaps he should have read the fucking script before going in. Just going like, I hate this, I'm never gonna act again.
Like, the reason I find it funny is I just picture Sean Connery on set going, I quit making movies. And I'm like, oh, you mean quit making this one, you know the legal repercussions of that, right? No, I'm talking about quitting movies in general. Because of you, this movie's bad.
I mean, I have a soft spot for League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, the movie, just because it's bad, but it's fun trash. Whereas the comic, it was just a little bit too brutal for me. Like when Mr. Hyde brutally rapes the Invisible Man for being like a traitor in one of them. It's like, this is too much for me. Maybe someone who has a little bit tougher palate than me can manage to draw some enjoyment out of it, but you know, when I see stuff like that in a movie, it's kind of easy to just like, turn away. And then it's over, but when you read something, you actually have to experience it. Same with comics. So, you know, I have issues.
Yeah. I would say read at your own risk after hearing what he said, actually.
Yes!
Yeah.
Read at own risk. Anything else you've read?
Well, this next book I've read is surprisingly one of my favorites, actually.
You've just been reading good stuff, and I've just been reading fucking
terrible
terrible stuff.
No.
Oh, that's good to hear.
I've been reading bad stuff all my life. I actually mostly read bad stuff, but I don't like to talk about it because I usually don't finish.
That's what what this program is for.
Yeah.
Venting.
Yeah.
Anger.
If I don't like the book, either the story or the way it's paced, or the names. If I can't pronounce the names in my head, it feels like having dyslexia. So I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna finish that book. I don't want to talk about it. But this book, which I really love, is called The Devotion of Suspect X. It is a Japanese thriller from, I think it's 2003 or 4?
Before you go any deeper into it. Oh, you're such a weeb.
Well,
oh no, I just read manga. Here are 2 Japanese authors I've read.
No, but actually, I just... Japanese thrillers and horror are so much better than the American or English.
That's an overgeneralization. Have you seen Hereditary?
No.
Have you seen The Witch?
No, I'm not talking about movies. I'm not talking about movies, I'm talking about books.
Have you read A Head Full of Ghosts?
I've heard about it.
That one's good.
Well, my thing is with most thrillers from America or like Europe is like, oh, we have to find the person who murdered Miss Daisy by drowning her in chocolate. Something like that.
That was an oddly specific sentence.
I watch weird stuff online, okay. Anyways,
Your browsing history is even more cursed than...
yeah, the Norwegian FBI is like knocking on my door tomorrow, I bet. That's not a joke. I'm like, should I watch this? Like, anyways, I like Japanese horror because unlike Eastern horror, that was that was wrong.
Unlike Western horror.
Western horror, they focus on the evil of humanity. They don't focus on like ghosts or demons. They're mostly like psychologically. So it's worse because you know it actually could happen, sort of, to you. Well, the main character, she lives alone with her daughter in a small apartment. She has just recently gotten away from her ex-husband, who used to be kind to her and all that, but the moment his wealth ran out, he started to be mean.
Let's put it like that.
Yeah. And at the very beginning of the book, this is like the first 5 pages, he comes back wanting money. And she doesn't want to give it to to him. And it ends, things happen. I'm not going to go into that.
Wow, a book where things happen.
Well,
It's almost like there's plot.
well, things in the theme of domestic violence happens in that part. And the mother flips and kills him with something. And turns out the neighbor heard all the commotion through the wall. And he wants to protect her from getting caught by the police. And this is where Japanese crime novels, thrillers, differ from the ones we have in, for example, Norway or the US. Because
Yeah, but like most Norwegian crime is like so tame, mainstream, and garbage.
Good Life walked along the wall with a pistol in his hands. No, but like in our country and the US, you have to find the killer.
It's always about the detectives.
Yeah, and that's why I find it boring, because I've read that story 100 times literally.
When I was in a writing class, my teacher said like, if you want to write something easy, write crime.
Yeah.
Everybody does it. It's bog standard. The butler did it.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, in this story you know who the murderer is, like right from the start. The story revolves around how can they get away with murder? What do they do? And the neighbor is actually a highly acclaimed mathematician who can see patterns in, like, with math, they can see patterns on what people will do. So it's mixed also with sort of philosophy. So it's sort of a cat and mouse game between them and the police. And it's really interesting.
That does actually sound interesting.
Yeah.
Unlike crime novels.
Yeah. The butler did it? Oh dear, no. Can't imagine. No, but in all fairness, it's actually one of my favorite books.
Yeah,
Because
that's cool.
I read it in a day. We couldn't put it down.
I read the Black Jewels trilogy by Anne Bishop.
Oh, did she write that? Oh.
It's bad. Listen, the Black Jewels trilogy is like neat and all with its kind of concepts, and I'm reading this from like my notes. And the concept is basically, what if women were socialized as men and men were socialized like women? And it bodes very well from like that interesting kind of dimension right there. But she ends up doing something really weird that I don't like. She ends up writing like from the male's perspective and basically give them a masculine role. It just has like girls after them.
Well,
It's like it was so interesting to begin with, and then just suddenly you just fall down the chute of like, oh, now it's just misogyny again. That's great, but the women kind of want to bang them.
yeah, that was I was gonna ask you about. It's just like the lonesome knight lay down in bed, and then the handmaiden crawled in without him knowing it, and then they made love.
No, it's more like taking agency and stuff. And I can't help but think, if this had been female characters, it would have been much more interesting.
Well, yeah, actually.
And it was just like a medieval society that suppressed women, but no, it was like, let me reverse the gender roles and do nothing with it. I also read the Folklore of the Squirrel by Terry Pratchett, because I've read Pratchett. It's in my favorite shelf for a reason. Yeah, it's basically just a detailed account of the inspirations that led to the Discworld setting, and just things in Discworld. And if you're a Blood fan, if you can't get enough Discworld, you know, that's cool, I guess.
Yeah. I'm not a Blood fan, but I have read some of his books, and I just love the humor.
It's great.
It's so funny.
Yeah, I love Terry Pratchett, and I'm gonna talk more about him because I have so many more books. First, though, Frostflower and Thorn, and I need to look up this thing. Yeah, I call it a stripped-down fantasy story. It's really basic in its world, characters, and story. Maybe this was more special when it came out, as it has darker elements like sexual assault and horrible torture worse than death, but now it doesn't really strike me as interesting. I think the fault lies in the fact that it's so stripped down. I don't feel like I know the world, why I should care, and why I would even continue when I feel I know how it will end up. It was a two-part series, but I never bothered picking up the second one. Even though I have it, and it's one of those incredibly rare books that nobody's heard of from the 80s. But I also read Dodger, and that's up there someplace. There it is, Dodger. I lost the sleeve jacket, but I have it. Alright, I never had it. I never had a sleeve jacket. Just gonna quickly talk a little bit about Dodger. It's kind of like medieval England, but Discworld humor.
Okay.
Usually I'm very much for Discworld humor in my books, but in Dodger, like, even though I did love it, it kind of felt like too much. I really like Terry Pratchett and his writing style and all that shit, but Dodger was kind of like, oh yeah, you're doing this again. So, you know, I didn't really feel it all that much. It just felt like a little bit overindulgent. But it's still good.
So you're thinking about sort of a Groundhog Day thing where you experience the same thing over and over.
It's fine when it's in the Discworld series, but once you move outside of there, the Discworld style doesn't feel like it fits.
Yeah.
There's another book by Terry Pratchett I'm going to talk a little bit about, which does this better later.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Terry Pratchett, I've read, again, this is something I've been rereading. It's a book called Good Omens, and I know you read it because you were the one who recommended it to me.
Because I have taste, my friend.
I've been wondering if I should read it for a long time, and you were like, "Oh, you have to do it. The humor is great."
You know, I was thinking for the longest time when I started making videos for the tubes that I should talk about Good Omens. But once I finished reading it, I was like, I can't fucking spoil anything that happens in this. This is fantastic. Like, the one thing I feel comfortable spoiling is that demons bless instead of curse.
Yeah.
I think that's hilarious.
Yeah. Well, this story is, as you can tell, it has demons in it, so it's sort of heaven and hell, literally. It's about one angel and one demon, that's right?
Yep. An angel and a demon who doesn't want the world to end, but the end times are near, so they try to find a way to outsmart the divine plan.
Yeah.
Something I will add about the Good Omens is that I saw the first episode of the TV show.
Okay.
It's good, but but a lot of the humor is so entrenched into reading it.
Mm.
They did a very good job trying to translate it, but but it's way more fun as a book. Like, uh, like, if you have the option of either watching the series or reading the book, I would recommend reading the book.
Books are mostly better than TV series and movies. So,
No, there is so much fucking garbage that I'm so glad I've read because it takes shorter
yeah.
to watch it and then I try to read it. For instance, Stardust by Neil Gaiman.
Oh. Is it that bad? Or?
I love the movie.
Okay.
The book is just bad. Like, the book tries to be an adult fairy tale. And me, having read fairy tales and legends and stuff, know that stuff like that is already kind of adult if you go far enough back.
Mm.
And it doesn't really make a lot of, character growth. It's just kind of like, and then they went there, and then they went there. I don't quite remember, but all I remember is that I actually have fun watching the movie because it works on the characters. And they're there for more than just the little time. The space pirates have like a part about being gay is okay. Cross-dressing is okay. And I read something else too. The Vampire by Chris Baldick. I think that's how you pronounce his name. That's a short story. It was basically one of the first vampire stories ever written.
Yeah, because it sounds old, so I can't explain it.
Vampire. It's kind of a way better than Dracula vampire story, which doesn't say much because Dracula is at best okay. Don't at me.
As a huge vampire fan, I can say that I actually agree.
I mean, not to go too deep into Dracula, but there are parts of Dracula that are really cool. And there are parts of Dracula that are completely boring and doesn't feel like it has to be there at all.
For me, it's mostly the back in between letter sections in those books.
Yeah. My favorite part of Dracula is probably the Russian sailor's note. That explains how Dracula's just taking down people and he doesn't know what's going on. That's genuinely freaky.
Yeah.
But yeah, The Vampire is basically about a guy that is nervous because his sister is getting married to a rich aristocrat. And the rich aristocrat drinks her blood, and it's way more overt about vampires being capitalists. Or, the rich exploiting the poor would be the nobles and stuff. That's why I enjoy that. And another book I actually enjoyed from this year.
Finally, no.
I did enjoy Dodger too, but the other one was Nation by Terry Pratchett.
Terry again. I see a pattern.
He writes good books.
Well, I don't disagree. But you're a fanboy. You make fun of me for liking Japanese books, and then you're like, Terry Pratchett.
Yeah.
Terry Pratchett.
Yeah. I like Terry Pratchett. Find me a good reason to not like Terry Pratchett, and then you can make fun of me.
Well, I could easily make fun of you, but finding a reason for you not
to... trust me, I'm trying to not make fun of you.
I'm a fair shot. I mean, I hurt myself like 5 minutes before I met him today.
Yeah, if we suddenly cut this short, it's because Bassel's human jelly started leaking again.
No, but Terry Pratchett is a good guy, or was, and I really love his stuff too.
And Nation is like an anti-colonial story, which fits very well with the far-left politics found in this world, which of course I agree with, because I'm me. You know me, I almost fall off the political spectrum just by looking at something political.
I know.
It's a good anti-colonial story, and it doesn't really overstay its welcome with Terry Pratchett's kind of humor. Like, there is humor sides to it. I do chuckle at it, but it doesn't feel as intense as in Terry Pratchett's other work. Because in Terry Pratchett's other work, it can be a little bit exhausting. Or I don't think it would be exhausting, but I find it exhausting outside of this world. You know, all the other hallmarks are there, like great characters, great plotting, just great story. It's super fun. You should totally read Nation. It is so good.
Apparently I should. And maybe I will.
No, maybe. You shall.
No maybe.
I also read a book about beekeeping, and I'm not even gonna mention what it was because I don't want to give them advertisement. Because I was trying to get into beekeeping this year, because I'm weird. But I went to a course, and the first thing they told us on the course was like, you should just go out and learn. So so I had this book. I had read through it. And I was like, no, you don't need this specific book. And I figured, yeah, okay, I can stay a little bit on the course. And then they came up with like, oh yeah, you have to be social to make sure you can get help from other...
That's why you fail. Knowing you would be like, oh, I have to be social. Well, then I'm out.
But, yeah, that's basically what happened. You're not wrong.
Well.
Yeah. But, beekeeping wasn't quite for me.
Yeah.
But it was kind of like a big blow to just the entire book that like, oh yeah, this book is basically useless. It can teach a little bit about bees.
That's it.
That's it. Another issue I just have with the bee industry is that it's very focused on green capitalism. We can make money off this, so we need to preserve it. What about all the other insects that probably help save the fucking planet? What are those? We can't make money off those. Those can die. Moronic.
Well, they can make money off those, but not...
As exterminators, yeah, but that doesn't exactly help the ecosystem.
They can't make money by being kind to them or helping them.
I also read Pet Sematary by Stephen King.
Oh, that's a long time since I've read that.
Yeah, I didn't like the main character. So I didn't enjoy the books, I just kind of left it. Didn't want to continue reading it. Then I went on to read Fahrenheit 451, which I also didn't like.
I haven't read that one actually.
It's overrated. Someone did leave a very clever comment in my when I talked about young adult, where I specifically talked about like, I don't like this, and made a couple of clever comments. So you know, my view on that book isn't the only thing you should count on, but I do stand by the fact that I say it's very racist and sexist, and having the main character drool over a 14-year-old girl or something is like weird.
How old is the main character drooling over the 14-year-old?
Like 40 or something.
Okay, now I have a problem with... No, seriously, I have a problem with Stephen King there, actually.
No, this isn't Stephen King.
Well, I thought...
I jumped over to Fahrenheit 451 real fucking quick.
Oh, but doesn't Stephen King have a book named something like that?
It?
No, but...
it's almost...
I don't mean to like just suddenly jump over to something else, because I thought you were talking about Stephen King, and there's a book he has called Desperation Nevada, where, well, it's a slight spoiler. I'm not going to tell you how or what does it, but they are in a town where everyone who lives there has been murdered by one person who is possessed by something, evil spirit. But there's also other spirits there that can do other things to your head. For example, being extremely, like, sexually active, wanting to have sex. The sexual desire just goes through the roof. And one character in that book has sex or something, like makes out with a kid, and the main character is also in his 40s. So I was like, hold on, Stephen King has done this twice. Suspect.
This isn't the last King book I'm gonna bring up either. Pet Cemetery, I didn't like the main character. Let's move on from there. Fahrenheit 451, garbage, didn't like it. The main character's creep. And a lot of the political commentary is very much like, this really says something about society, doesn't it? There's some good points in it too, but I never got to it because I got bored and I just hated the main character and how much it fucking pushed in this idea of being like, this is my point of view, it is the correct one. I also read Bitterwood by James Maxey. You have actually tried to read Dragon Apocalypse by the same author after I recommended it in one of my videos about it, so...
I'm actually currently reading it.
Ah, cool, yeah. I was gonna ask what you're currently reading at the end, but...
Yeah, it's alright.
Fantastic, we know. Yeah, Bitterwood is the book he wrote before then. It's actually here. It is in my favorite shelf. I don't think it's as good as Dragon Apocalypse. I like it, but it's less because of that. So Bitterwood is about a world where dragons control everything, and this one guy called Bitterwood. Bitterwood kills dragons. And basically Bitterwood fucks up the entire course of humanity by being a dick. Of course, these dragons are very dickish, but it's a very cleverly written story, but he still has some major issues, like, he clearly developed better into Dragon Apocalypse. This one is very gendered. But I do love that and this is a little bit of a spoiler for this, but it turns out to actually be sci-fi.
Wait, isn't it fantasy?
It's sci-fi. But it has dragons, so it's cool.
I'm slightly more interested and also at the same time more turned off. Because I have a hard time with sci-fi books, not movies, books.
Oh, this is very easy sci-fi.
Okay.
It's not technical sci-fi, which I think is so hard as well. I don't like technical sci-fi.
Thank you.
But this is more like one of my favorite parts is that humans just have, like the most advanced humans just left. They managed to find one of them who basically acts like a god, at least in her actions and stuff. When you meet the real her, she's just like a slacker, like an asshole. And this person that has been seen as divine by everyone, her last words are, "Oh fuck." It is fantastic. I love it. Just Bitterwood, very clever, still a little bit over-gendered, but James Maxey, you should really just send me stuff for free, because I always advertise your stuff, because I like your stuff. It's smart, fun.
You just want free books.
Who doesn't want just free books, Bassel? Answer me that.
Well, I want to give you an answer, but then the video will be taken down for being rude. Well, should I talk about one book I read?
Yes,
yeah.
read and talk about another book you read, please.
It's really short to explain, and it's a biography by one of my all-time favorite creators, and I'm not talking about just in music and television, movies, and art in general. He does all of it. It's a biography of David Lynch, by David Lynch, called Room to Dream. And in the book you get to know so much about his family life and like behind the scenes information of many of his most famous works, including Blue Velvet, June is also a great book in my opinion, and also of course the most famous thing he's ever done, which is Twin Peaks. And when you read the book, especially his upbringing, you start to realize that the town of Twin Peaks and all the characters, their style, their fashion, hair, everything is based on characters from his actual life. So when you read about, for example, his aunt, his neighbors, you can sort of see, oh yeah, that's the mother of that character in Twin Peaks and all that.
Mm.
But it's also how...
Was he the log lady? Because that's the only inspiration. That's the only acceptable answer.
Yeah.
For where did David Lynch come up with log lady?
Yeah.
He was log lady.
Yeah. No, anyways, like it's the way he sort of speaks in the books or like talks about himself. Because for those of you who don't know, David Lynch is a weirdo. He is the epitome of a weirdo. And something he writes in the book, it doesn't make sense to a normal person. But there's this scene, like a part of the book where he talks about him coming home late at night, and it was dark all around because most of the people in his neighborhood didn't have that much power in their houses, like electricity. So it'd be total darkness except for a few light bulbs on the streets. And he suddenly saw this naked woman coming running towards him, covered in blood. And he said, you know, I found some sort of beauty in it. It was so weird. I couldn't look away. And it was just beautiful. I stopped and stared. She yelled something at me, but I couldn't understand. But I was lost in her grotesque beauty. And then he goes on to say one of my favorite lines ever, that anything in art or life can be beautiful. Even an open wound can be beautiful. And it only makes sense if you're like him or you are him, sort of.
Or if you're on cocaine.
Yeah, that's true. David Lynch is totally weird. My other part.
The only thing I can think about when you mentioned that like beautiful quote, which by all means it is beautiful and it makes sense, but when he's telling the story, I'm just thinking, artists are so disconnected from the real world, aren't they?
Yeah, that's totally true, especially about him. He is more of a painter than a director of movies and TV series. And the best example of that is, there's actually a picture in the book where you can see the painting he's talking about. When he was young, before he started to study abroad in, I think it was Germany, or it was Austria, he rented a room from one of his friends, or like his parents' friends. And they decided to throw him out to motivate him to do better in school, because he was really young at the time. This part was actually what drove him to do better with art and movies, so it actually sort of worked. Because when they decided we're gonna throw you out so you'll do better, he got so angry he started to work on this mural on the ceiling. That was a sort of a mixture between Picasso and Edvard Munch and others. And it was so well done with so many colors, layers of painting, that they had to paint it over 10 times to get rid of the painting. And I just love it. The only negative thing about the book is, even though it's really interesting, it's slow. And I mean slow.
I get that.
Yeah.
Speaking of slow, have you read The Hunger by Alma Katsu?
The Hunger. Is that a vampire book?
No. At least I don't think so.
I was thinking about The Hunger with David Bowie.
If I had read a book where David Bowie was a character, I think you would have known more about it just by your love of David Bowie. But I did recently watch Venture Bros. That has David Bowie in it.
Well, to be fair, he would creep in whatever he could creep into.
Yeah, but it wasn't real David Bowie. Anyways, I'm just gonna read up my review of this, and then we can talk a little bit more about it, around it. If I had to say anything about The Hunger, the only thing I would say was, it was okay. There are elements that I like in this book, such as the characters being very different from their own perspective, and that it dared bringing up that California was originally part of Mexico, and, as I expected, most known by that implication was taken away by force. Then the elements that I didn't like begin to settle in. The writing is really basic in that being able to tell what character is speaking or telling. The story is really difficult and you have to wait for them to reveal themselves. It's plain cynical when it comes to how humans act. I guess that Alma was trying to make a point about class in America, but it was really inefficient, especially when a lot of the apathy seemed to be held by the poor, and I expected this to be horror rather than a spooky love story. The most damning thing for me when it comes to this book is that I just didn't care what happened. Who would live and if anyone would succeed in going to California? I suppose it was fine though. Maybe this book is for you if you like frontier romance with a little bit of a thrill. I don't know, I thought The Hunger was kind of bad.
I felt the passion in your voice. I mean, I really think you loved the book.
Yeah,
Loved it. Loved it.
I actually went down to my, didn't I? I love using that voice. I use it in general, but it's also the boredom settles in. And you could tell that I didn't give a shit about it.
Yeah.
Because I had to look up my notes. Look at it. Unlike the next book I'm going to talk about, which is King Arthur, The Making of the Legend by Nicholas J. Hayam. It's basically a debunking book, because, you know, King Arthur is a pretty big deal. I don't know if you've heard of him.
A pretty big deal for you.
It's basically a book that goes through, okay, people have claimed that King Arthur originally came from here. Let's actually look at it and see if it was, and it turns out every fucking time, no, King Arthur wasn't based on this guy. One of my favorites is the first one he takes on. Is that there was a Roman centurion named Arthurius. And that was a very uncommon name. So it was probably taken from there. There's a lot of people that claim that. There's even like a garbage movie from 2006 where Arthur is a Roman centurion who joins the Celts and then fights the evil Roman Empire. Here's the thing though, it is great because it turns out that Arthurius was just like an accountant in Cornwall. It's everything it was.
Right.
So no, he has the same name. Probably didn't inspire the legendary king that could not be beat. Yeah, Arthur wasn't a Roman. Arthur wasn't a weird French guy who gets advertised on wine bottles. Arthur is just an amalgamation of a bunch of garbage. Nobody actually knows where he comes from. And that's basically what it is. Anyways.
Sort of what was it called again? Wanderer's Tale?
More like a bunch of wanderers just walked into a giant pile of soup and someone boiled it. And in their screams, they slowly started to recite Le Mot d'Arthur. I have another one I can just briefly mention before you continue because, again, 75 books. Snoke Queen by Joan da Vinci.
What queen? Snoke?
The Snow Queen.
I thought you said the Snoke Queen.
Yeah. I'm just gonna briefly mention this, just so it's out of my system. Didn't like it. Mainly, like, I like Joan da Vinci's stuff. Like, I love the Cat series by Joan da Vinci, let it be known. I love this little weird thing. Cat's Paw is, by the way, really good. You can read it independently, so maybe, you know, when I get those back, you can borrow that one and none of the others. The thing that really made me just go off the book was that there was an incestuous relationship. That made me go, nah, I don't need to read this anymore. I also read this first and second book in the Tripod Trilogy. This is one of the better known old ass books that I've read. and it was fucking amazingly terrible. It wasn't that everything was like horrible and bad in a specific way. It was just that everything was so average that it hurt. If you want the physical manifestation of the word, you have the Tripods Trilogy. I couldn't give less of a shit about that series. And I read the first one and I thought, you know what, it would be really funny if I read all three. So I read the second one, and then I was over it. Just didn't feel like reading anymore. It was just so bog standard. Your turn.
Yeah, well, these two books, I haven't actually finished them yet.
Listen, most of these books that I've talked about I didn't finish.
Yeah.
I was just like, this is garbage, and threw it at the wall.
No.
Yes, the incredibly rare stuff that almost nobody's heard of, not even the author, since like the 80s. I've just abused them.
Stop violence against books.
No.
There's two books I haven't actually finished yet. I thoroughly enjoy them, but I just haven't finished them yet. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce the name, because it's Brom. So I'm not sure if it's Brom or
Broom.
the broomstick. The first book I started to read from him is called Lost Gods.
Yes,
And
I've read that too.
yeah, I was gonna mention that actually. I'm almost done with it. The story is paced fairly nicely, I would say, and the author isn't exactly what they would call Shakespeare. But
No, I would call him a lot of things, but talented is not one of them. Go on.
He's a talented artist.
Yes,
Yeah.
I will 100% agree, because there are some great illustrations. Like, I have a hardcover edition.
Yeah. It's about a guy who is on the wrong path in life, tries to get away.
It's basically Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say, but
Which I've also read.
yeah.
Not this year, but I've read it.
The reason why I was gonna mention the start of the book is that's actually the main problem I have with the book. The story goes from 0 to 100 in the first like 20 pages or something. It's like, oh, here's the new characters, brand new characters, and then boom, he's dead, going to hell. So, as he just mentioned, it's basically a modern take on the Divine Comedy, but with more flair and humor and just, yeah. I've read also the Divine Comedy, and I like Lost Gods better, to be fair.
Listen, if I'm given the shot, given like the option between having like my leg broken and my toe broken, I want to pick the toe.
Yeah.
Like, didn't mean I enjoy breaking my toe. That's kind of harsh. You know, I think Lost Gods is fine.
Yeah.
It's even fun sometimes, but
Yeah.
I find that, you know, so many of the female characters lack so much agency in that book. It's like, oh yeah, now let's wait for the main character to come along and tell us what to do and what to feel and what to stuff.
Yeah, no, exactly. The book isn't great, but I like it. It's just enjoyable to me to read.
Yeah, it's some fun monsters.
Yeah. The other book I'm currently reading from him, I actually just bought. It's called Krampus. Have you read that one?
I have not read Krampus, no.
This book is based on another story, Folktale, which is Brom's brand. He retells a famous story or character, mythical character, from his perspective, and this is totally the same.
And he does it with cool monsters he comes up with. His perspective means I added a couple of monsters. What do you think?
Yeah.
You lost some of the subtlety. What do you think?
Yeah.
Shut up, bro.
Yeah. Well, this book is actually very short. I mean, very short.
Oh good, less of him to read.
Well, the
I
main...
hope Brom doesn't actually find this.
Someone is reviewing my books. I need to watch this. No.
You're very good at drawing, Brom.
You're actually very good. No, but this story starts with a poor guy living in a trailer who has an ex-wife who hates him, and her new husband is a criminal and so forth, yada 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 yada. And at the start of the book, something happens where Santa is fighting the minions belonging to Krampus. And he gets a hold of Santa's... I can't believe I'm saying this. He gets a hold of Santa's sack.
As you do.
And puts his hand inside of it, figuring out that what he wishes for will come true when he just thinks happy thoughts. Krampus minions, they think the sack is gone forever. I haven't figured it out why yet, but that thing belongs to Krampus.
Mm-hmm.
So the story is basically about Santa and Krampus fighting, with the other main character helping Santa, I think, so far. But the weird thing about this book is Krampus is in a Christmas story, in a culture which he doesn't belong in. And he also sort of is being put into the Norse mythology, and I'm not sure if Norse mythology had a Krampus.
I think there was something similar.
Something similar, but not a Krampus, sort of.
It wasn't named Krampus, but from what I remember, there is like an old story about if you don't fix up everything by December 13th and you're ready for Christmas, Krampus is gonna get your ass.
Yeah.
Luckily that isn't true, because I'm fucking terrible. Although this and like Christmas Godzilla is like my only Christmas decorations. I don't have to worry that much.
Yeah. Santa as the character, he is not... When you think of Santa, you think of like, ho ho ho, the jolly sort of tubby man. But in this book, Santa is jacked. Like,
I usually think of Santa as Santa Slane.
Like
that wrestler movie. Where Santa is actually the devil and an angel has to defeat him at curling in order to bring him back to hell.
In this story, Santa is the opposite of what you would expect for Santa to be. He is a buff man with muscles, and I think Brom based him on how he would think Odin looks like. Because from the art of the book you can see he totally looks like a Viking god, sort of.
Oh, okay.
Mythology. There's a lot of Norse mythology in this, which I don't think fits, sort of. But so far it is a good book, and it's a good Christmas book in the way that I hate Christmas. I hate the holidays. But this gave me some sort of Christmas spirit, because it's not about Christmas exactly, even though it's during Christmas.
Hang on, I need to find everything that I've read this year.
Yeah, I'm actually done with all the books I've read.
You see this? This is where I am. This is everything I've read. Are you fucking kidding me? I'm gonna speed through some of these.
Yeah, okay.
Easy Riders, Raging Bull by Peter Biskind. It's one of my new favorite books. It's about how Hollywood was basically fucked in the 70s or 60s, and then they brought on directors for the first time who had been to film school and knew what they were doing and started making weird shit.
Yeah.
It's interesting, and it's full of like, oh yeah, the Hollywood studio has always been terrible. I also read the Tattoo Encyclopedia. That was basic as fuck.
Okay.
It has some cool illustrations, and you know, if you want like a tattoo or something, which...
No, I don't want a tattoo. No, what are you talking about? No.
There's at least some kind of like, oh, this is the symbolic meaning of these things.
Okay.
Personally, just get the Book of Symbolism, which I have down here. I'm not gonna bring it up because it's heavy as shit, but
I think I have it.
that's way more detailed and way better. Read Mongrels, so kind of werewolf story, kind of. It was difficult to follow, and it was like just a little bit annoying. I don't know. The Poetry of Racism by Guru Sibeko, I read, which is one of the best books I've read all year.
Okay.
It's basically a book about Norwegian racism and how that affects black people here, and it's very interesting. People should look it up. I also read the complete Sherlock Holmes.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. First story is a mess. Studying Scarlet is just what the fuck happened at the end there?
You know,
There's some fun elements, but it's still like.
I think the Sherlock Holmes series is overrated as a whole. Actually.
That's fair. I also tried to reread something for once. Because I thought maybe I just didn't get it when I got it. The Lie Tree by Frances Haddinge. It still sucks. I don't know what to say beyond like it's kind of like Victorian fetishism, but not, and kind of like Garden of Eden thing. I don't know. It wasn't good. I also read The Goblin Emperor, but I talked about that in my basically I like goblins video. It wasn't good. Death, a Graveside Companion. I have here.
Sounds familiar.
It's this one.
Can I?
Yeah, you can have a look. See.
Yeah, I have this in another edition.
Oh, is it better than mine?
I'm not gonna answer.
Good. Here's what I wrote about it. I think what drew me slightly away from this book is that the subject of death in human culture is a field not many, including myself, are not as interested in. I also feel like it was often too heavily written to be as enjoyable as it could have been and focuses too much on the Western perception of death. What drew me to the book to begin with was my appreciation for the aesthetic and artistry of death. This book has plenty of that, and even descriptions going into the symbolism of the images, which is all great. Even if I do feel like the book is a bit too rigid when it comes to the interpretation it makes. I would recommend it to those fascinated to death, both the cultural and aesthetic aspect of death, though I would first and foremost recommend it to someone who is keenly interested in both, even though it's a bit culturally limited.
Yeah.
Oh, I also read, like, when I was a little bit bored, like, a book called, a book in Norwegian called Skrekkelig jul, skumle skapninger som herjer I julen, or Horrible Christmas, creepy creatures that cause havoc during Christmas, and it's a fun little book about like various myths surrounding Christmas. It was fun. Oh, it turns out that Kings of the Wild wasn't actually the first thing I read this year, because I also read Bloody Rose, the sequel. I should have talked about that immediately, because it's not as good, mainly because it is way more of a lore thing. I kept forgetting the main characters in the band as well. It's good, but it wasn't quite my thing. I also read Earthsea.
Oh.
And I struggle to read Earthsea.
Yeah, me too.
I think the writing style just makes me sleepy. There's a lot of people who say it's really good, and I hope those people enjoy it.
I'm about halfway in the first book.
Yeah. I mean, they're interesting. They're good. And if you read the afterwards by Ursula K. Le Guin, mwah, beautiful, fantastic. She had so many fantastic things to say, especially with fantasy. I mean, I love it. But I can't read it. Battle Axe by Sarah Douglas. Just very bog standard, not my thing. Emma Goldman's complete works. I like Emma Goldman because we share a political ideology. I read some political stuff this year. I actually stopped reading Inkheart because I just didn't care. I was angry. And it felt like it was talking down to me and saying, books are the most important things in the world, yeah.
I read that series several years ago and I never thought about that.
It's just kind of patronizing, I feel. But I jumped over to Emma Goldman. Specifically, this was during the protests in America.
Oh.
And I needed to read something that was a little bit more political and current rather than escapist. I also read How Fascism Works by Jason Stanley, which I describe as the liberal hell book.
Of course you do.
Yeah, I know, but like, it's more like he describes all of the ways that fascism can infiltrate like culture. And that's really interesting, but it doesn't propose any answers. It's just like, we're fucked, fascism's coming to get us. If we go a little bit more left, we have some answers. Also read God is Disappointed in You, which is a very edgy atheist title, I know. But in it, it's not that bad. Some pretty funny observations. Kind of summary of some Bible stories. I think I specifically wrote down like one of my favorites here.
Sorry, who's the author?
The author, Mark Russell.
Oh, I thought it maybe could be Richard Dawkins.
Every edgy atheist wants to read Richard Dawkins, but nobody should. He is just like so mean-spirited and like, oh, you believe in this, well that must mean you're an idiot. Just Richard Dawkins, fucking chill out.
He is intelligent but full of himself.
He knows one subject and think that makes him better than anyone else. I'm especially fond of his observation that Israel is the only country he knows about that is named after a wrestler. Really? I chuckled a lot. Yeah, apparently Israel is like a character in the Bible who wrestles lions and shit. Penguin Book of Witches, which is, let me check because I don't remember all that much, which is never a good sign. I liked it though, apparently. Yeah, it's just like a bunch of accounts about the cultural perception of witches from the inception to the early 19th century with a rather Western-centric perception. It's interesting. I also read The Truth by Neil Strauss. This is just me going rapid fire about this. It's good. Turns out that being a pickup artist fucking destroyed his life. And the story about like how he recovers from that and tries different ways of dating. Interesting. The Belgarad. I don't even remember. I read it in Norwegian and didn't think much of it. I just wanted to stop.
I usually try to finish a book when I've started it. But
yeah.
It has to be really bad or bland for me to not finish.
I did write something. Oh yeah. Made an interesting observation. It's my fault. At first I was positively surprised by how not terrible this book seemed for its time. Then I realized that it was released in 1981 and I had read it as 1931 for some reason, and my positive surprise was replaced with the disappointment of how regressive it was.
There's a 50-year difference. Well, what's so bad about that?
I think I just held my thumb over the 8 and went like 1931, oh, this is gonna be really racist. Wow, it's not that racist. Oh, 1981. Oh, it's really racist. For its time. Great! I don't care about it. I also read this.
Ah, Scandinavian classic.
Wouldn't call it that if you read it.
That was a joke.
It's just a lot.
Yeah.
No, nobody sits down to read that shit. Everyone just kind of hears about it and then leaves it at that. I also read a little bit of a series of mythology books. Tales of East Africa, Celtic Tales, and Tales from Japan. You see, you're not the only weeb here. But I didn't like these books all that much because it's just stories in the public domain and yeah, they don't take into account the racist undertones that can be added to translations and stuff and trying to demonize people of different cultures. Because, it was a long time ago. They don't care about that, they just want to reprint stories and make money off them. What I actually found really interesting was a collection of Russian fairy tales.
Oh,
Because they were collected before the Soviet Union, and you have, the Tsar was nice in the story, and that is fucking bizarre to me. Because the only thing we hear about pop culturally throughout about the Tsar is that the Tsar died because nobody liked him. Absolutely worth checking out some old Russian fairy tales.
Yeah, I actually have a huge fascination for Russia.
Matt Clayton, I've talked a little bit about. He writes about mythology, but actually has like a modern reinterpretation in mind when he reads stuff. So it adds a lot more context to the stories and probably makes them less abused than they were when they were first translated. The Witch's Bible I read, which I got from you, which was terribly outdated from the comments I saw about it, and I didn't find all that interesting to read, but now I have it. So thanks.
I would have to agree that the book isn't that interesting.
Yeah.
Especially if you don't believe in it.
It's, even if you believe in witchcraft and stuff, it is outdated. So it's, read more modern witch stuff if you want to get into it. Dragons, the Myths, Legends, and Lore, I read. Yeah, I described it as serviceable at best.
Yeah.
Because it's just a collection of like, okay, here's a bunch of dragons that has been through culture. I also read Journey to the West. There are 4 volumes and it's kind of big. Journey to the West is this classic Chinese story. I don't know what more to say about it. It's kind of about finding like the Buddhist revelation and bringing that to ancient China and describing every other religion there as crap. Where a monkey with basically superpowers ruins and then saves everything. But it's kind of interesting because all the characters have basically flaws. That's something you don't see every day.
No.
So I enjoy that. And it made reading this ancient story actually way more accessible. It's just that some of the stories aren't as interesting as other stories, so you gotta find the gold nuggets.
Yeah.
But the rest is not good. Serviceable. I also read Jack London, The Scarlet Plague, which is kind of a theme. I've read a lot of plague fiction.
Didn't you get that book from me?
You did. You did give it to me. I don't know why I said you did. I did. Yeah. I found it to be way too cynical, way too mean-spirited, and thought about it and just looked outside at the actual pandemic that was happening and thought, you know what? I'm glad this book was wrong. You gotta agree, though.
Yeah, kinda.
It's just so cynical and mean-spirited, and then you come to the actual plague, and it's like, it's not that hopeless. It's actually a lot better.
Well, you have to remember though, the Scarlet Plague was based on the Spanish flu, and the Spanish flu is, or was, way worse than the COVID situation.
Yeah, but still, it's...
And also, even back then, just comparing it to COVID, people back then, during the Spanish flu, were much more accepting of wearing masks than today. And I find that interesting. Because we are supposed to know better now, but we don't. So, yeah.
I also read Goblin.
Oh, what's that?
It's one of those trashy books that nobody has heard about since the 80s. Goblin is basically a collection of short stories about, or not short stories, but just stories
Yeah.
about a samurai lady who does samurai stuff and fights demons. I do have notes on this that I kind of have to go through, so meanwhile, Terry Pratchett's train book of geography of the Discworld. Just get it if you're a Blood fan. I don't remember what it's called because I don't have it right in front of me right now, but it's kind of just like a summary of information about the Discworld. It wasn't really for me. But now on to Goblin. If I have to say what Goblin's biggest hurdle as well as its biggest strength is, then I would say that it's a book for those in the know. If you're into old epics, know a lot about Japanese folktales and legends. Huh? You weeb?
Yeah.
And like the pulpier side of fiction, then this would be something you'd enjoy. It also helps if you love that there is combat in books. Personally, I think I would describe it more as a hurdle to me than anything else, specifically because I'm not such a huge fan of pulp, and while I can appreciate old epics, I would say that I personally prefer stories where characters continually develop rather than stay the same while being overpowered. I was also not a fan of the constant combat, nor the writing of for the same reason. While it's extremely direct and to the point, it also feels undeveloped and at the edge of not working. That's not to say that I thought it was without merit, just that I thought it wasn't much beyond okay, and that I can easily imagine borrowing this book to a friend of mine. Who would enjoy it more for being a bigger fan of the setting. So if you're in the know, I recommend picking it up. If not, I may recommend skipping this one. I was actually thinking of my other weeb friend.
No.
Don't act so shocked. I can have more friends than one.
I know you have more friends than me.
Yeah. I
You
have three
literally
friends.
You literally have more friends than me.
Purely mathematically. By virtue of math, you have more friends than me. Oh, I also read another Discworld book, Terry Pratchett's The World of Pooh.
The world of what?
The World of Pooh. If you think scatology is funny, or you want to know about Discworld scatology, I suppose it's okay. What's much more interesting for me to talk about, though, is Stephen Chambers' Hope's End and Hope's War. Jesus Christ, I have so many fucking books. Why do I keep doing this? Basically, Nazis travel to the moon or travels to another planet, and someone finds out that Nazis were bad and decides to try to topple and take over the system. Read the first book and then ignore the second. I think that's good. That's good enough. I also read A Ballad of Songbird and Snake, which is up there in my new favorites, even though, I didn't like it that much. I liked it, but mainly it's just the newest Hunger Games book.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And while I think it is well written and the story is cool and all that, I think it tries way too hard to tie in the story of Katniss with President Snow. Like it's really fucking just trying to pile it in. And I prefer like the subtlety and the political comments of the Hunger Games over Ballad of Songbird and Snakes. Even though, there's some genuinely haunting stuff. And I also read Narco-Capitalism, in the Age of Anesthesia. It's about how drugs have been sold throughout time.
Oh, sounds interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting. I recommend picking it up. A friend of mine said you should read this, and I said okay, and I got it.
Yeah, I like to read about weird stuff. And I mean weird.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
It's an interesting subject. It also describes Freud as like a cartel because he recommended cocaine so much, and I think that's funny. The Griffin Mage trilogy. Skipped out on that one early because it was incredibly repetitive and boring. Stephen King's The Shining, I read.
Oh.
And when you mentioned the thing about like moods and stuff, I think that's like The Shining's biggest strength. It's like incredibly well written, but it's also just kind of something you can flow through.
Yeah.
Just like, if I were to talk about like a book as just like brainwave dead, just kind of like garbage TV, I would, if there was a book version of that, I would call it The Shining. Just, The Shining is so easy to read, and it's all about the mood you get from reading it, and the horror isn't effective, so I didn't like it much, but if you just want to go on holiday and not think, but seem smart, get The Shining and read it, and people will think you're intelligent, while in reality your mind is on static. I also read a collection of mythology by Scott Lewis. It's a decent collection. Not much more to say about it. There is a little bit more to say about the Silent Companions. Like, get the mythology book, it's fun. The Silent Companions is a book that I think is occasionally good at trying to be creepy, and that has a great main character in how much I dislike her as a person, but which also feels like a bit off. The writing is just like a million tiny needles that keeps the book from being fun. So it's okay, I guess. It's more for those more into Gothic literature.
Oh, like me then.
I also read Das Kapital by Karl Marx. Or I tried to. I like it a lot. I agree with the political points, but you just have to skip like the first 50 or 100 pages to get into it. Karl Marx even commented on it like, oh, I know. Could have been better. But what I've found in reading political theory, especially left-wing political theory, you can just read the memes. You'll get the idea. I also read a collection of Mary Shelley's works, but it was a really bad collection because it usually started like, here's chapter 4, let's read from here. That's not to say that it isn't effective, but it's kind of like a weird way to introduce people to it. 16 Ways to Defend a Walled City, that was kind of... Let me just see what I wrote about it. Okay, firstly, K.J. Parker, fuck you. This has nothing to do with the book and the context and content of it, by the way. But this was advertised to me as like an individual book that had no connection to anything else because I like to just read series when they're done. That's why I have Patrick Rothfuss's books, but have never complained about him not finishing it. But why do you have to make it into a series called The Siege? The thing about 16 Ways to Defend a Walled City is that while it is well written with a lot of witty dialogue and can easily be both hilarious and heartbreaking, it never really grabbed me. I think most of this stems from two culprits. Firstly, this book is far too politically apathetic. It's both important to protect the city from invaders, but the narrator also has always managed to adapt to changes, so why should we thematically care about keeping the status quo, especially when the narrator has often found more comfort among enemies than friends. Secondly, these characters don't feel all that much like characters, especially the main character. He's more a lexicon of being clever and snark while not being part of a bog standard status quo, and that I've seen a billion times before. Are fun elements, but I never became invested.
I was also about to ask how many more books you were gonna.
I'm at the tail end. I'm at the tail end. God damn it, people.
No, it's not your fault.
It is directly his fault. Directly my
no.
It is actually 100% my fault that I've read so many books and I thought, oh, we can talk about every book we've read this year. That'll be fun. We can get some content out of that. And then it turned out you hadn't read a lot of books, so it didn't become a back and forth. It just became me yelling as quickly as I can about books. Anyway, this thing, it's good. It's entertaining. It is very interesting. The introduction is worth it. I'm not going to fucking even try to pronounce how to say this thing because it is physically impossible for me to look at this title without my brain literally leaking out of my ears.
Oh, nice cover.
You should have read more. Unikokutuat. Don't bleed on it. It's very good. I don't like it.
I bleed everywhere. No.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Unikotat.
My new ringtone is just gonna be you trying to pronounce this.
And then you hear 3 months later.
Yeah, basically.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
But the name sounds very similar to like the Sami people's type of name, or like ancient Sami, kind of like.
Yeah, because it's Inuit.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That's why I think the name is something like quite something.
See, you can't tell that by reading.
I want to try to pronounce it, but I also don't want to offend
be
the Sami
racist.
people. Yeah.
Also, it's not the Sami; it's the Inuit.
You know, when I say it sounds like the Sami.
Yeah, no, that they live close to each other, like geographically, so it makes sense. You know, they belong from the same language branch. But yeah, I get it. Okay, I also read Alien Earth by Megan Lindholm. I don't know if she's a Norwegian author. It's a good book, but one I can't find all that engaging. It's greatly written, but it's just... It wasn't quite for me. I don't know, it moved way too slow, which, yeah, they use hypersleep and you're kind of conscious on the ship.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. Jesus Christ, I couldn't care. The White Mists of Power I also read, which sounds very White Power-esque. It was someone's attempt at a first book, and you can tell. It's not all that well written. Some cool elements made up for less than stellar writing occasionally. It was just, not for me. And then finally I read Tomorrow Everything Will Be Dark, 2 of the books in that series. Basically good zombie books.
Oh.
Okay, so suddenly people get like this bacteria in them and it makes them into murderers. And they're still very intelligent, so there's that. But it's also like a zombie book that focuses on empathy. Which is nice in the Zack Snyder, Dawn of the Dead world, where being a lone hero is everything that counts. It's better, but it's also aggressively gendered. And also kind of eco-terrorist or eco-fascist like.
Oh yeah, okay, now I understand what you mean.
Yeah, it's kind of like
eco-terrorism?
Yeah, that I meant eco-fascism, but it's kind of like, oh, if it keeps on saying like if this is Earth getting vengeance, this is Earth getting vengeance, and I haven't read the last book, so I don't know how it is going to end, but, you know, it's a good book series, and I recommend checking it out. It's translated, so you can check it out. So anyway, Basil, besides those books that you said you're in the middle of reading,
Yes.
what books are you reading now?
What books I'm reading right now? Another biography.
Yeah.
The book I reread is extremely interesting. It's a biography about Freddie Mercury. And you get all the typical biography, like how it goes, the rise and then the fall, the making and then the what sort of death. But
Basil, did you read more books and just didn't tell me, so I aggressively had to yell about books for like 2 hours? Books!
the interesting thing about the book, as I've said, is like you get to know about his life. But I think it's around each, like every second chapter, it talks about the history and the development of HIV and AIDS in society.
Oh, that's actually really cool.
It's really interesting, and it's done with a fair amount of finesse. There comes a point in the book where those two themes and subjects in the story collides because, as you know, Freddie Mercury got HIV and then AIDS and died. And it's called Somebody to Love. It's fairly... It's not the greatest biography I've read, but it's up there.
What are you reading now, though?
Right now, nothing, actually.
I'm going to start reading A Silver Thread of Madness at any point now, but I just haven't been bothered to read this Thin Little Slice of Bread by Jessica Amanda Sampson. It might be Salmonson. Yeah, this is one of those incredibly rare and incredibly worthless books that I own.
It's really rare, but also worthless.
Like me. I don't know, I have a kinship to stuff that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
Like, I want to know if it's trash so that I can tell other people if it's trash or not, and if they should give it a chance. Who knows, maybe I'll stumble across something good. I haven't stumbled across that much good stuff.
Well, as you've said or told me, I believe you.
Yeah. I mean, one of my greatest findings, and I do mean greatest, is like Search for the Faradon.
What's that about?
Oh no, it's that terrible book about.
Oh, I thought you said it was great in the sea.
No, it's my greatest find. But it's bad.
Okay.
You know, it's a kid that gets raised by badgers, and then he makes the earth explode by giving the good gods the 3 items in a magical blanket, and then they glue the world together after all the animals, who are all vegetarians, goes under in earth bunkers. And then when everything's glued back together, humanity restarts. But we fucked up again.
Oh dear.
And now the main character is going around in the woods and retelling the story because it's 100% true according to the author. And I've never laughed throughout reading an entire chapter until the part where he insisted the story where the earth exploded was true.
Right. Have you been on cocaine this whole time?
No.
The story sounds like the rambling of a madman who's done like 4 lines of cocaine in 5 minutes and hasn't slept in 4 weeks.
As I said, my greatest find.
Your greatest treasure.
So anyways, read whatever you want. We'll try to do this monthly. Basil, when I say read whatever you want, in your case that means read more.
Yeah.
So we have more stuff to discuss, so I don't have to sit there and just talk at you for like Jesus Christ, I don't even know how long we've recorded.
Yeah. Well, to be honest though, I do plan on reading more, but the reason why I didn't mention any book names is because I can't remember the name of the author or the title. But I'm going to read more books from my favorite Japanese author.